The Shmuz this evening is sponsored by Jerry Gluck, Le'ilai Nishmas, his mother, Rivka Bas Yeshua. The yahrzeit is this evening. May the Neshama have an aliyah. The Medrash Tanchuma brings down a very interesting event, that Eliyahu HaNavi was once walking in a derech, and he says that he found a man, and this man apparently not only didn't treat Eliyahu with respect, he began making fun of him. He began malig umlotzitz. He began throwing derision, scorn at Eliyahu. And at which point Eliyahu said to him as follows: Ma atamashiv liyom hadin, sir, what are you going to answer on the Yom Hadin? Achar shelo lamadat Torah, when you haven't learned Torah. Apparently Eliyahu Navi, from the conversation, understood that this person was a full, legitimate Amoritz. The tainas that the man had was against Eliyahu as a scholar, as a Torah, when he represented the Torah. And from the conversation, Eliyahu understood that this person was a complete, utter Amoritz. And instead of answering back, instead of getting into a vikuach, Eliyahu just asked one question: sir, what are you going to answer on Yom Hadin when you leave this planet? And they ask you, did you learn Torah? What are you going to answer them? Amar, he said, Yeshli lahashiv, I have a very fine answer, the man said to Eliyahu. Bina v'das v'leiv shelo nasli min hashamayim. And they didn't give me the bina, das, and chokhmah. They didn't give me the wisdom to learn Torah. Therefore, there can be no complaint against me. Amarti lo, Eliyahu said back to him, Ma malachtecha, what do you do for a living? What's your profession? Amar li, he said to me, Sayid ofas v'dogimani, I trap fish and birds. Amarti lo, Eliyahu said, I said to him, Minos alcha das v'leiv likach pishtin, who gave you the wisdom and understanding to take the flax, to spin it, to weave the nets, v'lasos amatsudos, and then to create the traps, lakachat dogim, and then to trap the fish, the birds, and then to sell them. Who gave you the wisdom to do that? He answered back, the man said, Bina v'dash shenasnu min hashamayim. Where I got that wisdom from was min hashamayim. The man clearly was a mamin. He understood that Hashem created the world and runs the world, but he claimed that he didn't have the wisdom, wasn't given the wisdom to learn Torah. Marti lo, Eliyahu said to him, Likach as a pishtin larg latavas lakat dogim, to take the flax, to weave it, to create the entire process of catching these fish and selling them, that they gave you bina v'das. But to be kona the Torah, to acquire the Torah, which doesn't require anywhere near the same wisdom, they didn't. Don't you know the pasuk says, Kikar ve'lecha davar ma'ud beficha u'b'levavcha lasoso. The pasuk says it is close. The Torah is very close, very easy to acquire. If you had the wisdom to create the fish traps, the bird traps, then you have enough wisdom to acquire the Torah. Says Eliyahu miyad, immediately hirer belibo v'hirim kolo. Immediately in his heart he had tremendous regret, and he raised his voice in a cry, and he began crying out loud, to the extent that Eliyahu Navi felt that he had to be menachem him. He had to give him consolation, and he said, B'ni, my son, don't feel so badly. Every occupant of the planet does exactly what you did. Every occupant of the planet and when it comes to learning Torah, they assume they don't have enough wisdom, they assume they're not smart enough, but their business dealings, their life dealings proves them wrong, different than anyone else. Don't feel that badly. And that is how the Medrash Tanchuma explains this event. I wasn't zochah to hear this from the Rishiva, but the Rishiva asked the following question on this Medrash Tanchuma. And that is, what happened to this man? Here's a man who spent many, many years with a very clear understanding. Very clear understanding that he wasn't granted the wisdom. He wasn't granted the understanding, the das, to learn the Torah. What happened to him in this one moment? What changed that suddenly he reached a totally different understanding? He began crying, and he raises his voice with such bitter tears that Eliyahu Navi has to console him. But not only what brought him to this point, how is it that he's different than every other human being? Eliyahu Navi said that what you've done is something that everybody does. But everybody who does this spends their entire life living in blindness. Why was this man different? What singled him out that when he heard this question that Eliyahu Navi asked, all of a sudden he changed his entire life, changed his direction, and now became a different person? And I think if we focus on trying to understand exactly what this man went through and what changed in his reality and why he was different than everyone else, we'll have a different understanding of the human being. And to do this, I'd like to begin with a very interesting thought. My daughter, who's 8 years old, was playing a computer game. The game was called Cooking Mama. And I looked over her shoulder to watch the game, and I was a little disturbed by the vivid pictures. You see, Cooking Mama was preparing a turkey for Thanksgiving. But what you had to do is you had to take this large hatchet and chop off the neck of the chicken. And there was a lot of blood. And then you had to pick off the feathers, and there was more blood. And you had these very large knives, and you had to chop it and cut it. And every time you cut and every time you chop, there was more blood and more blood. Now, my daughter was having a good time with the game, but I was like, something strange going on over here. Until I looked on the very fine print. Who put the game out? PETA. People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And the moral of the story was, don't be like Cooking Mama. Don't cook a turkey for your Thanksgiving dinner. Go vegetarian. Be better than Mama. Okay. Now, there are many, many people out there who spend millions, if not billions of dollars to educate young children about the high morality of vegetarianism, the ugliness, the debased activity called eating human flesh. And you have to wonder, what is the underlying theme? What is the ethics? What is the morality? What are they thinking? And I'd like to share with you what I believe the underlying concept of real vegetarianism is. There is a book written by Richard Dawkins. He wrote quite a number of books. He is a rabid, rancid evolutionist. He is the spokesman now for the evolutionists. And he's a creative individual, and he has some interesting theories, but he's very, very well accepted in the world as the spokesperson for evolution. In his book, The Selfish Gene, he writes the following. He says, everyone in all societies accepts the fact that murder is wrong. To take a life of another person is absolutely amoral. Every society recognizes it as horrific and is unacceptable. The only thing worse in almost every society than murder is to actually eat human flesh. Cannibalism is considered the worst of the worst. Interesting, though, he says, these same people have no problem eating other species. They have no problem eating birds. They have no problem eating cows. They have no problem eating all of these other species. And he says, isn't that strange? We all accept now that racism is wrong. It is wrong to hate a person based on his color, based on his ethnic background. Yet aren't we practicing an advanced form of racism called speciesism? What makes you think that because you're of one species, you have the right to murder someone of a different species? That you have a right to eat their flesh for your own consumption? That's morally repugnant, it's horrific, it's horrible. As a matter of fact, he says, it's absolutely amoral. Think about it. A human baby is revered. A human baby is protected, but a full adult chimpanzee is killed for any which reason, for a laboratory test. Don't you know that we share 99.5% of the same evolutionary history? And therein lies exactly the basis. You see, we are all occupants of the same planet. We all began in the same primordial soup. We all, by luck, by chance, by random mutation, and then survival of the fittest, ended up where we are. And the difference between a chimpanzee and a human being is but a small, small minutia. Therefore, if a human being has the audacity to stand there and kill another species, thinking he's superior, thinking he's better, he's practicing speciesism, which again is not much worse than racism, and is something that is abhorrent and despicable and cannot be tolerated. Just for record, as an aside, he says some of his friends wonder why it is that he's very adamant about the fact that he's much more concerned about the murder of whales than he is about the housing problems of people. There are millions of people who are subject to malaria now because DDT has been banned. But there are more people who are concerned about the environment than about the babies dying in Africa, and he explains the rationale behind it. because who makes you think you're better because you're of a different species? Okay. Now, based on that, I would like to address the following number of questions to this theory. And I don't have the chance to ask them to Richard Dawkins in person. I don't know if we would speak, if he would speak to me or I would speak to him. But let me address the following questions. Here's the following question I'd like to ask. Question number one goes like this. A male lion will eat up to 75 pounds of meat in a sitting. A male lion will eat 8,000 pounds of meat a year for its survival. Does PETA have a problem with the lion eating a gazelle or eating a zebra? Now think about it. Mr. Lion, what right do you have to cut down a zebra at the prime of its life? Look at that gazelle in its beauty. You've killed it. You've murdered it to consume its flesh. You don't hear about PETA throwing paint on the jaguar. Oh, you murderous barbarian. Apparently, for 99.9% of the occupants of the planet, it's okay to eat other species. It's just man can't. And here's the question. Why not? If it's okay for the cheetah, for the jaguar, for the mountain lion to eat another species, why isn't it okay for man? And this question, my friends, is not a small question. But I'd like to really take it the other way. If in fact you're right, if in fact you believe that it is improper for you to cut down another species for your own survival to fill your belly, you'll excuse me for asking the question the other way. Have you ever seen a healthy, strong stalk of corn, 6 feet tall, standing there? What right do you have to cut it down in the prime of its existence and eat it? A wheat stalk. You've taken a wheat stalk and ground it to nothing, crushed it. Don't you know that we share 50% of the evolutionary history of this wheat stalk and the corn? Don't you know that we've come along the same path? It went this way and we went that way. And if you don't understand where I'm heading with my line of questioning, let me take one more step in terms of the questions. We experience a lot of good in the world. We see a lot of beauty. There's a lot of wonder. There's love. There's friendships. There's sunrises. There's flowers. There are parrots. There are octopuses. There are beautiful, beautiful floral scenes. As you and I know, all of this evolved. There was no plan, no forethought, no wisdom, no intelligent design. What happened was a few random mutations, and then survival of the fittest is what locked it in. You see, the competition between the molecular structures is what arranged for the primordial soup to exist in the beginning. And then the amoebas began competing one with the other. And before you know it, we have the entire world. So here's the one point that you must understand clearly. All the beauty, all that's significant in the world only came about because of this great principle called survival of the fittest. That is nature's most greatest gift, because all the beauty that you see only exists because of it. If it weren't for survival of the fittest, nothing that you see would be here. That being said, I'd like to ask the very following question, and I'm not saying it facetiously. Let's assume that I'm big and I'm strong, and you're not. What is wrong with my walking over to you, taking your wallet, and killing you? Well, you'll say that's not nice. But it's survival of the fittest. Not only is it survival of the fittest, that's the law of nature. That's what's brought about everything that you see. Every tremendous accomplishment that you see in the world of nature has only been brought about by that great principle. And all that I'm doing by pulling out this gun and blowing you away is keeping with the law of nature. What could be amoral? What could be unethical? What could be wrong with that? And by the way, that concept has been propagated by people. Don't say, Rabbi, you're outlandish. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. There are books that present that very theme. I can name just one such book to you. You may have heard of it. It's called Mein Kampf. As a matter of fact, Adolf Hitler was very, very specific and very clear when he quoted exactly this line of rationale, the line that these are the laws of nature, and this is what nature has been presenting, and this is all that's needed in the world. And as a matter of fact, I'll share with you a quote or two. The one doctrine of racial struggle, which is a cornerstone of philosophy, is the iron logic of nature. Survival of the fittest. He quotes over in Mein Kampf over and over, survival of the fittest. But not only that, you should know that the German government created a euthanasia program. Forget the Jews, forget the gypsies, forget the people of questionable race. There were about 250,000 Germans, good Germans, from German families who were killed. Why? Because they were mentally ill. And mentally ill people do not produce good bloodlines. Mentally ill people do not produce the type of Aryan race that we want. And I'd like to present to you the fact that exactly as Adolf Hitler said again and again in Mein Kampf, if you have an elderly person and that person is not producing anything for society, the basic law of nature demands that you kill them. If you have a person who has a disability, it's only kindly and fit that you kill them immediately, because heaven forfend, they might replicate. They might reproduce and have more of them. Blindness, deafness, mental retardation. Heaven forfend to have that continue. Survival of the fittest, the very basic law of nature demands that you murder them immediately so that you don't have this weakness and these bad things around. And again, if it sounds rather ludicrous, again, don't go that far, because that's exactly what Hitler was propagating, what he said over and over in Mein Kampf. And I want you to hear the point. It is morally consistent. Not only is it morally consistent, it's exactly taking the line of logic one step further. And just to make the point, I want to carry this line one step further beyond that. Any good standing moral social ethicist, any good standing person of concern will agree, babies we're not sure about, human life we're not so sure, but there's one holy grail that everyone agrees to: green first, earth first, save the ecology. Meaning to say, the one last vestige of holiness, the one last vestige of religion is the ecological stability of planet Earth. Okay, now let's assume for a minute that I was the president. Let's assume for a minute that I had under my controls the Strategic Air Command, which, as you know, is always airborne, always with a nuclear warhead, so that in case of an attack on the United States of America, there'll be planes up in the sky who can drop enough nuclear warheads to effectively destroy the planet. Okay, now let's assume for whatever reason, maybe because my health bill got voted down or I was just in a bad mood, I decided that's it. I'm dropping the nuclear bomb. I'm destroying the entire world. I hit the red button. SAC Command gets the message. They drop the bomb. And the entire planet ceases to be. Okay. Now, none of you would be around to discuss this. But in theory, if you were around to discuss this, would anybody have a taina against me? Would anybody say, gee, golly, that wasn't nice? That was morally repugnant. How could you have done that? If you were around, if you were to say that, I would say to you one simple line. Sir, where did it all come from? It was all an accident anyway. There was just one big bang. A very big, big bang. And from this bang came 100 billion galaxies, and each galaxy containing 100 billion stars. And within some galaxy somewhere was this Earth, and everything that you see just happened to be. No plan, no purpose, no intelligent designer. It just occurred. Well, if you're walking on the beach and the surf sort of kicks up the sand and makes a design, and someone steps on it, would you have a claim, oh, how could you destroy that? It just happened anyway. There's nothing there. If the world that we see just occurred, just happened, then tell me, please, what's wrong with ending it? What's wrong with just saying, I had enough of it, poof, it's no more? And now I'd like to share with you where I'm heading with this. You see, you know what the answer to every one of these questions is? And the answer to every one of these questions is that there is only one source of morality. And that is the straight heart that God put into the man. Every human being was given a very clear understanding, a very vivid, powerful understanding of the sanctity of life. Every human being was given a regard for nature, because every human being was created by God with a very clear understanding. But here's the problem. If I accept that that morality comes from a higher power, if I accept that morality comes from a creator, it comes with a whole package of things that I don't want to accept. Many things that I'd like to do that this package won't allow me, and many things that I don't want to do that this package wants to force me into. So what I do is I create this tremendous incongruity. I create these false illusions where my morality is absolutely inconsistent. I value life, whether it be the life of the lemur, the life of a human baby, the life of the planet, even though intellectually it's utterly inconsistent. The reason why an evolutionist can have a tremendous claim against a human for eating a chicken, but not against a mountain lion for eating a baboon is not logical. It doesn't make sense, but somehow there's a moral need to have things that are sanctified, things that are protected, things that are holy, because that's what's in the heart of a person. And if you think about all of the claims, what you find is a tremendous, tremendous inconsistency. I'd like to share with you what I consider one of the greatest inconsistencies ever imaginable. There was a line. Listen to this line, please. A man who dares to waste 1 minute of time has not discovered the value of life. Let me say it again. A man who dares to waste 1 minute of time has not discovered the value of life. Which Baal Musar said that? Which person who believes in a creator says that? The person who said that, his name is Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin? Charles Darwin? Charles Darwin, can I ask you a question? Let's say you saw Elsie the cow. Elsie the cow is sitting in a field ruminating. And ruminating, if you're a human being, means thinking. Ruminating, if you're a cow, means chewing the grass. Would you say, Elsie, how could you waste a moment of time? Don't you value life? You wouldn't say that to Elsie, because that's ludicrous. So too, Mr. Charles Darwin. After you die like Elsie the cow. There's no world to come. Your neshama goes, nothing. There is no neshama anyway. So how different are you than Elsie the cow? You just occurred, you just evolved, and you just sort of ended up here. What possible difference does it make if you waste an hour of time? What do you mean the value of life? How could you utter those words? Would you like to know what the answer is? Charles Darwin had a human heart. The human heart understood the extreme value of life. The human heart understood the extreme value of a moment of time. The problem was that he lived with a tremendous inconsistency. His philosophy basically said the whole thing is nonsense. Time is valueless. Life is valueless because it all just occurred. It all just happened. It doesn't have meaning. It doesn't have purpose. And he lived in the greatest state of inconsistency, the greatest state of conflict. And if you'd like to understand the point that I'm trying to get at, is that the human being is capable of tremendous conflict. Tremendous two states of mind where their understanding and their reality are so divorced that you almost can't believe it's a rational, sane human being. And I believe that this is exactly pshat in this Medrash Tanchuma. You see, most human beings are capable of living a life of lies. Understanding that the words that I say have no connection to the truth. Understanding that the way that I act has no connection to what I believe. But when Eliyahu Novi said to this man, Sir, do you have the wisdom to take the flax, weave it? Do you have the wisdom to create the knots? Do you have the wisdom to fish? If you have the wisdom for that, you have the wisdom of the Torah. That man was struck. Why? Because that man had a tremendous dose of truth in him. That man was an ish emes, and when he heard a solid argument, an indisputable argument, he said, oh my goodness, I have to change. The average human being, when he hears an indisputable argument, very, very quickly comes up with entire rationales, entire lies, forgets it quickly, and doesn't bother to spend but a moment thinking about it. I'd like to quote Winston Churchill. Men often stumble upon the truth, but they quickly pick themselves up and go along as if nothing happened. Most human beings that you see will see the truth, and they'll understand it vividly, right there in front of their eyes, and then they'll go about their business as if nothing happened. And if you ask them, how could you live a pack of lies? How could you live your entire life based on a philosophy that you know is bogus? Whatever. The human being is capable of living with such a state of inner conflict because that's the way Hashem created us, to allow us to have Bechira, and to allow us to have free will. But this man was different. What was different about him was there was a tremendous sense of truth, a tremendous sense of emes, and once he heard it, once he saw the inconsistency, if I have the wisdom to do this, then surely I have the wisdom to learn Torah. He changed his life. He let out a cry. Eliyahu Navi said, you're different than every other occupant of the planet because you're a truthful person. Most human beings can go about their lives, go about their business lying to themselves, and you can't do it. And because of that, that man became a vastly different human being. And he became a very different sort of person. And I believe this concept is something that comes along very often in our lives. If you look at most people live with tremendous inconsistencies and tremendous lies within their life. And I'd like to share with you one that I believe all of us have. If you've ever looked at a travel brochure, you might have seen a beautiful, beautiful beach scene. Hot white sand, crystal blue sea, cloudless sky, one gorgeous palm tree, the words Bermuda stretched across the top. You may have looked at the travel magazines, you may have looked at the travel brochures. Do you know that most people who read travel magazines never intend to go to those places? They either can't afford it or aren't even that interested, but they look at the images and they see the beautiful tropical scenes and they say, wow, that is beautiful. It is my belief that most people, us included, when we deal with Olam Haba, when we deal with the world to come, we're kind of like that guy who opens a travel magazine. Beautiful scene, wonderful, but I have no intention of ever going there. You see, I know that Chazal described the world to come as fantastic and unimaginable, and will be exactly what we created ourselves into, and we'll enjoy such tremendous riches, but it's not really applicable to me because, quite honestly, I have no intention of dying. You see, I'm going to be here, exactly as I am, forever. I have no serious plans, no serious intention of dying, and therefore it's an interesting scene. I like the white sand, I like the beach scene. This Olam Haba business is interesting, but it has no application to me because I ain't never going to be there. It's not in my plan, not in my agenda, and therefore it's irrelevant. Now, if you think I'm funny, I don't think it's funny at all, because I think it's very, very true. And the proof that it's very, very true is find me a man who doesn't very, very seriously consider his retirement. Find me a man who's 40, who's not constantly thinking, gee golly, how am I going to retire? I'm going to retire 25 years from now. 25 years? You got to worry about 25 years? That's a long time. What are you so worried about? What are you putting away money for the pension plan? Yet, if you think about the average lifespan, certainly a man who's 65, what's 25 years after that? Very unlikely you're going to be here. And if you think about the reality, most of us do not ever deal with this concretely, and do not ever deal with it seriously, and we don't ever think about it in a very real way. There's a very interesting book that I've recently read. Christopher Reeves was a famous actor. Christopher Reeves had a life that's hard to imagine. He was of Superman fame. He was the famous movie actor Superman. He had the idyllic life. 6'4", very handsome, muscular, extremely wealthy, extremely famous, and very active. He owned his own boat, owned his own horse. He regularly skied. He sailed planes. He was a very, very successful all-around human being until one day when riding on a horse, he fell off the horse, hit his head, snapped his neck, and disconnected his head literally from his spine and suffered a spinal injury that basically completely incapacitated him. When he woke up in the hospital and they fused his brain back, his skull back to the spine, he had effectively no motor movement. He could not move his legs. He could not move his arms. He could not turn his torso. He couldn't control his bowel or his bladder. He could not breathe on his own because he had a break that was so high between the C1 and the C2 that basically all the nervous system transportation, all of the neurons firing back and forth were cut off, and he was finished. And he says when he woke up, he knew that his life was ruined. The doctors explained to him that there was no chance of him ever walking, no chance of ever holding a pen, barely a chance of him ever breathing on his own. And he recognized the fact that his life was ruined. And he says he was so utterly depressed. He was so utterly bleak and down. When his wife came into the room, at a certain point he said to her, "Why don't we end this already?" And he says, she said the following words that saved my life. She said, "You're still the same person." And he says when he heard those words, that you are still you. You're still the same person, and that gave him back his sense of identity, his sense of purpose, his sense of being. And he wrote a book. The book is called I'm Still Me. And he writes about his tale, and it's worth reading. But my friends, here's the point. It shouldn't happen to anyone, but Rahman al-Islam, let's assume it's you. You wake up in the hospital, and you are utterly, completely paralyzed. From your neck down, you can't move an arm, not a leg. You can do nothing. Are you still you? What do you mean, am I still me? I'm dead. My body is 100% dead. I will never walk, never run, never ski, never play tennis, never go to the bank. I'm utterly, completely ruined. Are you still you? And let me share with you why that is such a powerful question. Most people lumber around this planet with the biggest mistake of their existence. Most people view themselves as physical entities, temporarily sometimes having spiritual experiences. And would you like to know who you are? You are a spiritual entity, sometimes having physical experiences. The you, the I whom speaking to you, am utterly, completely spiritual. You're temporarily housed in this body, and temporarily you're put into this spacesuit, into this little being where you remain. But I, who am housed within this, will separate and leave for eternity. But I, the one whom speaking to you, am utterly spiritual, temporarily having a physical experience. And that's the exact opposite way that people normally think about life. What do you mean? I'm spiritual? What are you, from California? Am I spiritual? I'm spiritual? I'm physical. I'm very physical. Look how physical I am. I'm utterly, completely physical. And that is patently false. Because if you think about who you are, if Christopher Reeve said the words, "I am the same person," if his wife said to him, "You're still you," what that was identifying was the fact that the essence of me is not my arms, not my head, not my chest. The essence of me is the one inside who thinks, who feels, who remembers, and that's the part that lives on for eternity. And at some level, we all understand that. And yet we live our entire existence in an utter contradiction to that fact. We're so concerned about this world. We're so concerned about our housing, our food, how much money we make, the honor that we receive. That's the biggest concerns of our existence. And what that means in plain language is my physical existence, that temporary, really irrelevant part, I'm very, very concerned about. But the essence of me, who I really am, I ignore. And the reason I ignore it is because it's like those travel brochures. Olam Haba ain't never going to happen. Death, not me. And therefore it doesn't apply to me. And my friends, that is the greatest inconsistency that we human beings can ever experience, can ever live through. And I believe it is curable. How do you cure this great inconsistency? In brief moments of revelation. Every one of us sometimes get it. A light bulb goes off and we finally understand. Sometimes it's at an unfortunate event. You go to a funeral of a friend of yours, and you recognize your own mortality. Maybe it's a relative, maybe it's a shiva house, and you recognize the fact that people, regular people, just like you and me, some people more clever, some people less clever, but all of them have the same fate. Every human being who ever was on a planet, left the planet, I too am a people, that will happen to me. And every once in a while you get those revelations. Those revelations are the most obvious kinds in the world. And the key then is to take it and run with it. Take it and incorporate it into your essence. Take it and then say, okay, I get it. I am a spiritual entity temporarily housed in this physical body. What am I doing? What am I accomplishing? Where am I headed? I was a high school Rebbe for many years, and I've gone through many different experiences. One sticks out vividly in my mind. A fellow says to me, Rebbe, is it true that in Olam Haba, the Tzaddikim are sitting around the table learning Torah? Is it? That's how Chazal describe it. Silence for a moment, and he says, that's not Gan Eden, that's Gehenna. Sitting around a table all day long learning, that's Gehenna. That's not Gan Eden. Okay, that's a high school perspective. But I'd like to share with you the fact that in the world to come, this part, the arms, the leg, the head, the chest, all of this is not going to be there. I, the essence of me, the one whom speaking to you, will be there forever. And here's the point. How much pleasure you have in the world to come, how great that is based on one thing. How much you developed you. How much you accomplished as a spiritual entity. If you spent 95% of your focus on the bodily needs, if you spent 95% of your time living in this physical, corporeal reality, and that's all you focused on, then in the world to come you're going to have very little developed and very little waiting for you. If you begin changing the focus and you work on your davening, you work on your learning, you work on your chesed, you work on your midos, you become a different sort of person. The balance changes. And when you leave this temporary existence, when the spiritual part leaves this temporary physical part, forever you are and enjoy that which you've accomplished. And here is the greatest punchline. The single greatest nourishment, the single greatest nutrient for the human being is Limud Torah. Learning, specifically learning as deeply as you can, even more than anything, Gemara, Halacha, Chumash, the more deep, the more infused you become with energy, is the single greatest dosage, the single greatest fuel for your neshama. However, there are 5,761 reasons why you cannot learn. And I'd like to share with you a few of them. Of the 5,761 reasons why you cannot learn, let's begin with the following. Number one, I am too fat, too old, too slow, too fast, too smart, too dumb. I would love to learn, but it is too hot, too cold, too wintry, too summery, too springy, too full-like. I really love to learn, but my brain is too fast, too slow, easily distracted, disinterested. However, I have a chance, but I started learning too early, too late, too in the middle. The yeshiva I went to was too yeshivas, too chashidus, too litvish, too modern. My upbringing, I had a mother and a brother and a father and a sister, and I can list you 5,761 reasons why you will not be able to learn. And I'd like to share with you that there's only one counter argument, and that is that God created you, God gave you the capacity, and Karav Hadover Beficha B'Vavcha Lasoso, Hashem made it easy for you to do it. And that's one of the greatest realities that you have to understand. You see, there are many, many reasons why I don't have the head to learn. I don't have the background, I don't have the opportunity, and I will never succeed in really learning. And there's only one reason why you will succeed. And that is because that's how God designed you. God made you with the intelligence, and God made you with the capacity, and God gave you the ability to learn. And if you want to take the personal stira test, if you want to take the personal self-contradiction test, just ask yourself the question, what university did you go to? What advanced degrees do you have? And if you didn't go to school, what business are you in? I've seen guys who are ADHD out the window, and when it comes to a business deal, they're insightful, they're brilliant, they're concentrating, they're 100% there, hour after hour. Long negotiations, they don't miss a beat. The same guy who couldn't open a Gemara somehow aces organic chemistry. How's that? The same guy who, I don't know, I just can't learning, I don't have that academic bent, becomes a literature major. Literature major? What? Goes to law school. If you didn't have the academic bent, if you didn't have that ability, how'd you do that? We all live with these tremendous, tremendous inconsistencies, these tremendous inner conflicts. And my friends, there's only one solution. Be honest with yourself. Not with your neighbor, not even with your wife, not with your friends. Be honest with yourself. Ask yourself, is it really true? Is it really true that I don't have the brain? Is it really true that I don't have the ability to concentrate? I can't learn Chumash and Rashi. I can't learn Mishnayos. I can't master this stuff? What's so difficult? Hashem created me. Hashem gave me the capacity. Hashem gave me the Torah, said this is why you're on the world, to grow, to accomplish, and I can't do it. And if you'd like to hear one of the most motivating, to me, one of the single most motivating reasons to learn, it's a line the Chavetz Chaim says in Shem Olam. He says, in the world to come, there'll be many, many valuable things. Many, many valuable things. Many people will have illustrious positions. You could try to trade away all of your world to come. You could try to trade away all of your Olam Haba, and you will not be allowed to learn a section of Torah that you didn't learn in this world. If in fact you didn't learn an area of Torah, he says that's not accessible to you, and all of your world to come won't buy it because you didn't involve yourself here. He suggests very highly learning Mishnayos for that reason, because Mishnayos covers Kol HaTorah Kula, even if you didn't learn all of the Gemaras. But if you at least learned the Mishnayos, at least you have a touch, you have a hold, and you're allowed to learn it in the world to come. But my friends, it's a powerful, powerful understanding. You see, the current reality will change. It's not travel brochures. It's not Bermuda that I'll never travel to. I will go there. And understanding that, coming to that core cognition, understanding it and being truthful with myself, and asking myself, what am I capable of? And what can I accomplish, is a tremendous tool for growth. I think this discussion between Eliyahu and Navi and this person is very insightful. You see, this person was combative. This person was mocking. This person was full of derision for Eliyahu and Navi. What was Eliyahu and Navi's response? Did he say back to him with anger? Did he say back to him some sharp retort? He said back one thing. Sir, what are you going to answer in the Yom HaDin when they ask you, did you learn Torah? What do you mean? What was what we're discussing? What we're arguing about? But that is the core of the discussion. Because the reason why you're angry with Talmidei Chachamim, the reason why you have a beef with the religion, is because you're not a part of it. And the reason why you're not a part of it is because you're not learning, you're not involved, and there's only one question I have to ask: why not? And if you tell me because I didn't have the wisdom, where did you gain the wisdom to do what you do? That man was unique. That man was unusual. When he heard those words, he changed around and he started crying to the extent that Eliyahu Navi had to console him. I think we see on a regular, consistent basis tremendous inconsistency. When you see people who seem so moral, so ethical, how dare you kill a squirrel, a lemur in the African forest? How aren't you concerned for them? But then they're willing, quite happily willing, to kill human babies. And the question, at what point can you still do an abortion? And if you'd like to know how far the discussion goes, it's not just within the mother's belly. The discussion of abortion goes up until 30 days after birth. Because even if the child's born and the mother doesn't want the child, why should the mother have to suffer? And there are many moral ethicists who will tell you that it is absolutely acceptable, and it is the mother's prerogative to kill the baby within 30 days after the baby's birth. And don't be so shocked, because Adolf Hitler told you you could kill him at any time. Because it's a simple law of nature, and survival of the fittest. That's the basic law of the world. And when you see kind people, by the way, the Nazis were very sweet, very kind to animals, very concerned for animal pain. You see tremendous conflicts in the human psyche, and the reason is because Hashem created us with the ability to live in utter contradiction. The greatest contradiction that we live with is the fact that I'll never die, I'll be here forever, and therefore what I do doesn't matter. And that, my friends, is an utter, absolute lie. And we look at the world to come like travel brochures, and every once in a while you get a wake-up call. Every once in a while you see something, you experience something, you feel about it very differently, and it's at that point that you have to say, I get it. And it's at that point you have to be truthful with yourself and say, where am I headed? What am I doing? What am I accomplishing? This inconsistency is not only in learning and not only in things of that nature. The Chavos of always brings an interesting event. He says there was a Parush A Parish is a very great individual who separated himself from all physical pleasures. He was the type of person who literally was dovik b'Hashem, cling to Hashem, and was on a very high madrega. He was traveling to earn his living on a boat, and he met a person who served idols. And the Chavos Vavos brings down the discussion. This idol worshiper and this man is having a discussion, and the Parish says to the idol worshiper, "You're such a fool. You bow down to sticks and stones that have no power, that have no influence. Where does your blindness come from?" At which point this idol worshiper turned to the Parish and said, "And what do you believe in?" And he says, "I believe in God who created the heavens and the earth. I believe in God who's all-powerful, all-knowing, who's prevalent, who controls every act in nature." At which point the idol worshiper said to the Parish, "Ma'asecha soser rayanecha." Your actions are a contradiction to your words. Why? Because if your God is so powerful, if your God controls everything, why do you have to go on the ocean? Why do you have to go so far from home? Why do you have to endanger your life to earn your living? At that point, says the Chavos Vavos, the Parish made up, he's staying home, he's never leaving his house. And he remained in his house, earned his living, that way in his local town, no longer set sail on the seas. And I'd like to describe to you what was going on. This Parish was a well thought out man. This Parish thought about it and realized there's a thing called parnasa and is ishtadlus, and you have to take various risks because that's how you earn a living. So what happened? What happened was he realized that his very words that he was saying were self-contradictory. He had this person who serves idols tell him it, and in that moment he saw the truth and he changed. He said, "It's wrong, it's inconsistent, you're right, I'm wrong," and he changed around his life. That is a very rare experience. Most people, as Winston Churchill says, will stumble over the truth, quickly get up and walk away as if nothing happened. But every once in a while you have those revelations, every once in a while you see the truth, and one of the secrets of growth, one of the secrets of success is to take them, catapult yourself with them, and use them for your internal growth. May Hashem grant us the wisdom, understanding, and ability to put this into practice.